The government wants to develop over 20,000 acres of what they call the Petroleum Hub. They've set up the Petroleum Hub Development Corporation. I'm going to speak to the Chief Executive, Charles Owusu, when we come back to tell us more about this very ambitious project and address some critical questions that have been asked about its feasibility, how realistic it is, and whether they've taken other factors into consideration. Stay with us. We're still here on The Point of View talking many issues. My guest for the next segment is the CEO of Ghana's Petroleum Hub Development Corporation, or PHDC, in the person of Charles Owusu, to tell us more about this hub. It's been in the news for quite a while. 2020, Parliament passed the bill, and they've been working quite hard to get things started. They also signed a $12 billion agreement for just the first phase, so it seems like a very massive project. Mr. Owusu, thanks for joining us. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, Ben, for having me, and good evening to your viewers.
So this PHDC and then the hub is not new, right? I think the first time I heard about it was in 2020 when the bill was passed. Just walk us through the various timelines. How did we get here?
Thank you, Bernard. So Petroleum Hub Development Corporation, or the Petroleum Hub project, is one of the President's vision that was announced in 2017. But fast forward 2020, December 2029, the bill was assented to, that became an act. So we have the Petroleum Hub Development Corporation Act 2020, Act 1053.
Okay.
If we take that section 2, that gives the broad mandate that to promote and develop petroleum and petrochemical hub in Ghana. And in Ghana, this is where the board has strategically said, okay, in Ghana, then the location is Jomro, because a lot of work has been done by the task force in accordance with the master plan. So Jomro, because there were 3 strategic locations that was undertaken by the task force. So we're looking at South Pond area, we are looking at Atuabo, and then Jomro itself.
Okay.
Jomro, because Bernard, having read the master plan and visited the place, I think nature has blessed Jomro with the deepest depth of seawater, which ranges from 16 to 27. That work was done by Ghana Maritime Authority. What that means is that it should be able to accommodate all manner of vessels. And doing such project of a training destination for oil and gas, then you need that depth. If you take Takoradi Port, for instance, their depth is within 16 to 18. So that is why Takoradi is not able to move along this oil and gas enclave because of the depth. So Jomro is very critical for this project, and I believe God did that purposely for such monumental project. Secondly, Jomro has a flat land. That is good for construction and also less displacement of people. Remember, SDG is very critical about life and livelihood. And so technically, about 2 communities were supposed to be resettled, but we did 4 because of for future's sake. And transportation, Bernard, if you take Jomro, Jomro is closer to major discoveries of crude oil around us. So Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire, and even the Ghana oil fields are just close, about 5 kilometers. All the fields are there. So it makes it economic-wise to position this project in Jomro. And lastly, the hospitality of these people in Jomro makes it very accommodating, because it's a whole city that is coming up. So everybody will be trooping there. We need peace to be able to do this project. So that's why the location was selected. Having done that, there were 3 preparatory activities that was undertaken. One is, how do you acquire this land compulsorily? If you take the Land Act 1036 from section 240 to 249, it gives you what government must do, or the state, to be able to acquire land compulsorily going forward. All this thing has been done. Then you look at the environment. Is the location right with respect to environmental issues to go ahead? EPA did a fantastic job by getting what we call strategic environmental assessment, which is the C. Looking at the policy of that nature. Then the last thing was the spatial plan. Where do we put refinery? Where do we put petrochemical plant? Where do we put storage? All this thing has been done, and that one was also done by LUSPA. So putting this together is what is preparing or has prepared PAGC in our current situation. Now, the project is looking at 3 refineries with a capacity of 300,000 barrels per stream day. That gives about 900,000 barrels per stream day. 5 petrochemical plants, 10 million cubic meters in terms of storage capacity, and a jetty, 2 jetties. That should be able to accommodate VLCCs and ULCs. That's a very large crude carriers and ultra-large crude carriers. And that is why Jomro is critical, because of the depth of their sea. And putting all this is what is termed as the 60 billion US dollar
so
project.
you are mentioning many fantastic figures. So $60 billion.
Yes.
Now, the whole of Ghana's GDP is about $75 billion. So if you are going to attract $60 billion, that's like 90% of our GDP. That's serious. Now, that seems quite ambitious, particularly when for the past 3 years, your oil production has really declined in your main 3 fields, Jubilee, Sankofa, and then 10. You've not signed any new oil agreements in the past 3.5 years. Some people feel like prospects in our oil sector in terms of exploration and production are pointing downwards. So how on earth do you talk about $60 billion in what is essentially a declining oil economy?
Thank you, Bernard. And that is what we are saying, the vision. You see, you need to think beyond the 4 corners of your room. And if we cite Singapore, which has been in this business for over decades, 50 years, 100 years, has never seen a drop of crude before. So what the Singapore did was leveraging on their strategic location, and that is what the president is trying to do. We've claimed we are in the middle of the world, which is true. How then do we monetize this? So it's the vision. So if you look at this project, that's why it's novel. What government is trying to do is to create an enabling environment, get a regulatory framework, and attract investors to come. That's why last month, on the 18th of June, we signed the first phase to the tune of $12 billion US dollars. Actually, how did we do it? It is not because of our crude that is declining, or our economy, which is in this current state, but it's the vision that they see and the consistent demand for petroleum products. So that's why because the market is there, but nobody was creating this enabling environment. Bernard, if you go to Lomé here, do you know Lomé is creating a hub? But the danger is that we call it S2S, ship to ship, and that is very dangerous. And all the products we are getting within the region are just in Lomé, because they bring these huge vessels and then put them into smaller vessels into the neighboring countries. Now you've gotten a 20,000 acre land. Now you are building the refinery, and you are able to discharge and then connect to the various countries, and that is what we seek to do. So it's neither about our decline of our crude, but is the strategic location that we find ourselves and the demand vis-a-vis the supply. So now we're trying to say, okay, going to Rotterdam to pick product, or going to US, or going to Malaysia or Singapore, come to Jomro and pick it, and that is what we seek to do. So it's not just looking at our crude. If not, Singapore will not be where. Singapore is number 3 in the world.
So fair enough. So your point is you don't need to be producing that much oil to have a hub because of the other things you do. But still, globally, we are in the period of energy transition. So people are moving away from fossil fuels. Of course, some say gas is our transition fuel, okay? Why will I want to invest $60 billion in what essentially is going to be a declining industry? Because the move towards renewables is massive. So again, try and situate this for me. Is it this seems too good to be true? And the other thing is, we've seen so many things like this. Petroleum City, we've seen all kinds of names. I think there was one that was also supposed to be done under the previous government. And all of these things, they sound too good to be true and eventually end up that way. There's a strong suspicion that this petroleum hub is very similar to those things.
Thank you, Bernard. I think let me use this opportunity to thank my minister, Dr. Matthew Poku Prempeh. I'm just coming from Milan. Last week, the whole world gathered in Milan, Italy, discussing energy transition you were talking about. The critical issue here, Bernard, is about money coming to the developing countries and technology. This energy transition is looking at energy trilemma. So energy security, energy just or equity, and the sustainability. But you see, because it has its own geopolitical, the attention is on the sustainability. Bernard, you know that over 600 million Africans do not even have access to electricity. So the energy transition, that is why now it's just, they've given every country to develop how they want to transit. So if you look at Ghana, Ghana has developed 8 energy transition and investment plan till 2026. If you look strategically with this petroleum hub, we have 5 petrochemical plants, and I love the way you put it. Gas is the transition fuel. So after 2060, that is where our energy transition plan for now is looking at. If indeed we are transiting, all you need to do is to configure this your refinery into petchem or hydrogen, because you already have 5 petrochemical plants feeding onto your gas, or the feedstock of this plant is gas. So all you need to do is configure your refinery, and that is the growth strategy. Indeed, if you are going to transit, then you just configure these 3 refineries into a petrochemical plant that will feed into your either fertilizer or the plastics and all of that, the gases, the automobile, and so that is the vision. So Bernard, energy transition, as I've said, I'm just coming from Milan, is now giving everybody that. Now, do you know what they are saying? Now they say we can explore, but capture. So the technology now is CCUS, carbon capture, utilization, and storage, because they realize that people are not ready to move. So if you look at Asia, if you look at the Middle East and Africa, they've made it clear that we are going to use our natural resources to also develop and give jobs to our teeming youth. So that is clear, and it's clear that most countries are now developing their own energy transition. So to me, energy transition, and if you even take the energy transition document, Petroleum Hub is one of the critical things stated that we need to accelerate Petroleum Hub. Why? Because look, Bernard, the hub alone is going to have about 1,000 to 2,000 megawatts to feed the enclave. And then if there's any excess, we can even export it.